Her ex-husband thought he could humiliate her again, the second time, but he didn't have any idea what was coming. You are welcome to Stories with Oj. And thank you for stopping by. Let's dive right into the story. Her ex-husband's family invited her to humiliate her at his wedding with his new princess, as they all call her, but when she walked in with Obinna and Chijioke, his entire world crumbled. The pregnancy test trembled in Esther Chime's hands as she stared at the two pink lines that would change everything. After 3 years of marriage and 2 years of trying to conceive, she was finally carrying Martin Igbokwe's child. Her heart raced with pure joy as she imagined his reaction to the news. She had planned this moment with meticulous care. Martin's favorite dinner was warming in the oven. Ribeye steaks from the expensive butcher shop he preferred, paired with a bottle of 1995 Bordeaux they'd been saving since their honeymoon. Candles flickered on their dining room table, casting warm light over the penthouse apartment in Lagos they'd shared for 2 years. Rose petals formed a heart shape around his place setting, and she'd even wrapped a tiny pair of baby shoes to present alongside the test. At 26, Esther still felt incredibly lucky to be married to Martin Igbokwe. When they'd met at that charity auction 4 years ago, she'd been a community college student working as a caterer's assistant. He was the most successful man who'd ever noticed her. A Harvard-educated owner of a thriving real estate development company, and devastatingly handsome in his tailored suits. Their whirlwind courtship had felt like a fairy tale: expensive restaurants, weekend trips to his family's lake house, and a proposal that had literally taken her breath away. Tonight, she would tell him they were going to be parents, and their story would reach its perfect conclusion. The sound of Martin's key in the lock made her pulse quicken with anticipation. She quickly tucked the pregnancy test behind her back, wanting to savor the moment when she saw joy spread across his handsome face. "Martin, honey," she called out, practically vibrating with excitement. "I have the most incredible news to share with you." But the man who walked through the door wasn't the loving husband she expected. Martin's tall, 6-foot frame filled the doorway, his expensive Italian suit soaked from the October rain. But it was his expression that stopped her cold. His dark eyes, usually warm when they looked at her, were now frigid as winter stones. There was something different about him tonight. Something cruel and distant she'd never seen before. "Pack your things, Esther." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I want you out of here by tomorrow morning." The pregnancy test slipped from Esther's numb fingers. It clattered onto the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden, devastating silence. "What did you just say?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Martin stepped over the fallen test without even glancing down. His movements were sharp and deliberate as he loosened his silk tie, the burgundy one she'd given him for their second anniversary. "You heard me perfectly well, Esther. This charade is over. I'm done pretending, and I'm definitely done with you." Esther's legs felt unsteady beneath her. The romantic dinner, the candles, the rose petals, everything seemed to mock her now. "Martin, please. There's something important I need to tell you. Nothing you could possibly say matters anymore." He brushed past her toward their bedroom, his shoulder knocking against hers with deliberate coldness. "I found someone who actually deserves to be with a successful man like me. Someone who isn't." He paused at the bedroom doorway, turning to look at her with undisguised disgust. "Beneath me." Each word was carefully chosen to wound. Esther pressed her hand to her chest, struggling to breathe as the room seemed to spin. "Beneath you, Martin? We're married. We took vows in front of your family. My family. We promised to love each other through everything." His laughter was sharp and bitter. "Vows? To you?" Martin began throwing his clothes into expensive leather luggage, each movement aggressive and dismissive. "Esther, look at yourself. Really? You come from the barrio. Your family works in factories and cleans houses for a living. You barely finished community college with a degree that means nothing in the real world. These were things he'd once claimed to love about her. Her authentic background, her humble family, her down-to-earth nature. Now they were weapons in his hands. "But you said you loved me exactly as I am," Esther whispered. "You said my family was warm and real, unlike the cold people in your social circle. You said none of that other stuff mattered." I lied. Martin's voice was flat, emotionless. "I was young and thought maybe I could make something out of you, clean you up, teach you how to act around important people. But you can't polish trash. Can you, Esther?" Esther sank onto their king-sized bed, the bed where they'd made love just 3 nights ago, where he'd whispered promises about their future together. "How can you say these things to me? This isn't you, Martin. This isn't the man I fell in love with. This is exactly who I am." Martin spun around, his face twisted with something that looked like hatred. "I'm being honest. For the first time in this entire relationship. You want to know what's cruel? Being trapped with someone who will never be good enough. Having to pretend that you belong in my world when everyone at my office whispers about how I married down." Summoning every ounce of courage she had left, Esther picked up the pregnancy test from the floor with shaking hands. Maybe this would change everything. Maybe when he knew about the baby, the man she'd fallen in love with would return. "I'm pregnant. Martin. We're going to have a baby." Martin stopped packing. For one brief, desperate moment, Esther thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even a hint of the man she'd married. But when he spoke, his voice was even colder than before. "Not my problem." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What do you mean, not your problem? This is your child. Our child. My child." Martin's laugh was vicious. "I seriously doubt it's even mine. You probably got knocked up by some guy from your old neighborhood, and now you're trying to pin it on me." The accusation was so shocking, so completely unfounded, that Esther couldn't even respond. She stared at this stranger, wearing her husband's face, wondering when everything had gone so horribly wrong. "But even if it is mine," Martin continued, zipping up his suitcase with violent force, "I don't want it. I don't want any reminder of the biggest mistake I ever made, marrying you." Esther doubled over as if he'd punched her in the stomach. Her free hand moved instinctively to protect her still flat belly. "Please," she whispered through her tears. "Please don't do this. We can work through this. I love you so much." "Your love means nothing to me." Martin grabbed his suitcase and headed for the door, not even looking back at her crumpled form. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce. Don't even think about trying to contact me. Don't ask for money. Don't ask for anything. You're nothing to me now, Esther. You always were nothing, and you always will be nothing." The door slammed shut with such force that their wedding picture fell from the wall, the glass shattering across the floor in 1,000 glittering pieces. Esther collapsed beside the broken frame, clutching the pregnancy test to her chest as sobs racked her. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and the rain grew heavier. The candles still flickered on the dining table, and the heart made of rose petals remained untouched, a mocking reminder of dreams that had just been destroyed. As Esther knelt among the shattered glass of their wedding photo, holding the proof of new life in her hands, she had no idea that this moment of complete devastation would become the foundation for a transformation that would make Martin's cruelty the biggest mistake of his life. For months after Martin left, Esther stood in front of the cracked mirror in her studio apartment's tiny bathroom, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at her. Dark circles ringed her once bright eyes, telling the story of too many sleepless nights spent worrying about bills, medical expenses, and an uncertain future. Her maternity clothes, thrift store finds and hand-me-downs from her sister Chidinma, hung loosely on her frame. Despite carrying a baby, she had actually lost weight because food had become a luxury she couldn't always afford. The apartment was a universe away from the penthouse she'd shared with Martin. Located in the most dangerous part of Lagos, where sirens wailed through the night and gunshots occasionally echoed off the thin walls, it was all she could afford on her wages from 3 part-time jobs. The single room served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. A hot plate sat on a card table that doubled as her dining area, and her bed was a mattress on the floor that she'd bought second-hand for 20,000 naira. Martin's divorce had been swift and merciless. His team of expensive lawyers had somehow managed to prove she wasn't entitled to any of their shared assets. Everything had been in Martin's name from the beginning. She'd walked away from 3 years of marriage with a single suitcase of clothes and a heart full of shattered dreams. Esther pressed her hand to her rounded belly, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her. At 6 months pregnant, she was working as many hours as her body could handle, cleaning offices from midnight to 6 a.m., waitressing at a diner during lunch hours, and doing alterations for a seamstress in the evenings. The work was backbreaking, but the combined income barely covered her 160,000 naira monthly rent and the cheapest groceries she could find. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered to her unborn child. "I know this isn't the life I promised you, but I'm going to do better somehow." A sharp knock at her door interrupted her quiet moment. Esther knew that knock. Mrs. Patterson, her landlord, and she was 4 days late on rent. "Miss Chime, I know you're in there." The elderly woman's voice was harsh through the thin door. Esther took a deep breath and opened the door, trying to summon a smile. "Mrs. Patterson, I was just about to come see you. I'll have the rest of the rent by Friday. I promise." The landlord's eyes narrowed as they swept over Esther's obviously pregnant form. "You said that last month, girl. I'm running a business here, not a charity for unwed mothers." "I'm not unwed. I'm divorced," Esther said quietly. "And please, just give me until Friday. I'm picking up extra shifts." "Friday, then you're out. And next time, you better think twice before getting yourself knocked up by some man who won't stick around." Mrs. Patterson's words stung because they were so close to the truth, even if she had the facts wrong. After the landlord left, Esther sank onto her mattress and buried her face in her hands. She had called her family for help. Chidinma sent what little money she could spare from her job as a hotel housekeeper. But Chidinma had 3 kids of her own to support. Their mother, who worked double shifts at a textile factory, had already given Esther her entire savings, 230,000 naira. Esther's stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she'd skipped breakfast to save money. She opened her nearly empty refrigerator and pulled out a container of rice and beans, the cheapest meal she could make that still provided some nutrition for the baby. As she heated it on the hot plate, tears began to fall. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She should be in a beautiful nursery right now, surrounded by love and excitement about becoming a mother. Instead, she was alone, broke, and terrified about bringing a child into this world with nothing to offer. 2 months later, Esther was scrubbing floors at the Meridian office complex when the first contraction hit her like a lightning bolt. She was in the executive washroom on the 20th floor, alone, except for the sound of her own labored breathing echoing off the marble walls. "No," she whispered, panic rising in her chest as another contraction gripped her. "Please, not yet. It's too early." She was only 34 weeks pregnant. The baby wasn't supposed to come for another month and a half, but the contractions kept coming faster and stronger with each wave. Esther managed to call Chidinma from the office phone, her voice shaking with fear and pain. "Chidinma, something's wrong. The baby's coming, and I'm at work. Stay exactly where you are, please." Chidinma's voice was fierce with protective love. "I'm calling an ambulance and coming to get you right now." The paramedics found Esther collapsed in the hallway outside the washroom, clutching her belly as another contraction tore through her. How far along are you?" the EMT asked as they lifted her onto a gurney. 34 weeks, Esther gasped. "But there's something else. I think there might be 2 babies." The ride to Lagos General Hospital was a blur of sirens and pain. Chidinma met them at the emergency room, her face pale with worry as she ran alongside Esther's gurney. "The babies!" Esther gasped, reaching for her sister's hand. "Chidinma, what if something's wrong with them? What if they're not okay?" They're going to be fine, Chidinma said firmly, though Esther could see the fear in her eyes. You're going to be fine. We're going to get through this together. The emergency room was chaos, gunshot victims, overdoses, and families crying in languages Esther didn't recognize. It took Chidinma arguing with 3 different nurses before they finally took Esther back to a delivery room. Twins, confirmed Dr. Yuzochukwu, a tired-looking resident who couldn't have been much older than Esther herself. And they're coming whether we're ready or not. Are you prepared to be a mother of 2? Esther wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the question. Prepared? She had no insurance, no money for hospital bills, no nursery waiting at home. She had nothing except fierce love for these babies she hadn't even met yet. But as the next contraction hit, she realized that preparation was a luxury she couldn't afford. Ready or not, her children were coming into the world tonight. 14 hours later, at 3:47 a.m. on a cold February morning, Chijioke Uzodimma entered the world screaming at the top of his lungs, as if announcing his intention to fight for everything life had to offer. 2 minutes later, his brother Esther Chime followed more quietly, but Esther could see the same determination in his dark eyes. They're beautiful, Mika, Chidinma whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her nephews. Look at them. They're perfect. Esther held her sons for the first time, one in each arm, and felt something shift deep inside her chest. They were so small. Hioke Bareli 2,5 Kilogramm. Obinna just over 2.6 kilograms. But they were fighters. Chijioke had Martin's strong jaw and commanding presence even as a newborn, while Obinna had inherited Esther's gentler features, but with an unmistakable strength in his tiny grip. I'm sorry, she whispered to them as they slept in her arms. I'm sorry I can't give you everything you deserve right now, but I promise you this, I will never give up. I will never stop fighting for you. You deserve so much more than this. And somehow, someway, I'm going to make sure you get it. Chidinma squeezed Esther's shoulder gently. What are you going to do about Martin? I mean, those are his sons. He should know. Esther's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. He made his choice when he called me nothing and walked away. These beautiful boys are not nothing, and they don't need a father who would see them as burdens instead of blessings. But the money, Esther, you can't raise 2 babies alone with no help. Esther looked down at Chijioke and Obinna, both sleeping peacefully despite being born into poverty and uncertainty. I won't be alone. I have them, and they have me. We're family now. That's what matters. 3 weeks later, the reality of caring for twin newborns in a studio apartment with no money and no help was overwhelming beyond anything Esther had imagined. The babies cried in shifts, ensuring she never got more than an hour of sleep at a time. Her body ached from childbirth, but she couldn't afford to take time off work. She was back to cleaning offices within a week of giving birth, strapping the twins to her chest in second-hand baby carriers. One particularly brutal night, when both babies had been crying for 3 straight hours, and Esther hadn't slept in 36 hours, she found herself sobbing right along with them. She was sitting on the floor of her apartment at 2 a.m., a baby in each arm, wondering if she was strong enough for this impossible task. 5 years after the twins were born, Esther Chime wiped flour from her hands and glanced at the kitchen clock. 4:30 a.m. In the small backyard of their rented 2-bedroom house in Surulere, Lagos, she could see Chijioke and Obinna sleeping peacefully in the room they shared, surrounded by the scent of fresh akara, moi moi, and coconut cake that would feed the Okoro family reunion later today. The kitchen counter was covered with aluminum containers. 50 dozen akara, 3 gallons of moi moi, 2 dozen peppered fish casseroles, and 5 cakes. This single catering order would bring in 800,000 naira, more than she used to make in a month during those desperate early days. What had started as pure survival had evolved into something unexpected. During the twins' first year, when Esther was working 3 jobs just to keep their tiny apartment, she'd begun cooking extra portions of her grandmother's recipes and selling them to co-workers. Her supervisor at the office cleaning company, Mrs. Adebayo, had been the first to pay her 20,000 naira for a tray of homemade akara. "Esther, these are better than my own mother's," Mrs. Adebayo had said. Can you make them for my daughter's party? The first real catering job. 30 guests, 150,000 naira total payment, had been Esther's first step into her new life. Word spread through the local Lagos community faster than she'd expected. Within 6 months, she was getting calls every weekend. Within a year, she'd saved enough to quit 2 of her 3 jobs and focus on what she started calling Esther's Kitchen. Now, at 28, Esther had clients booked 3 months in advance. She'd obtained her business license, built relationships with reliable suppliers, and even hired 2 part-time assistants for larger events. More importantly, she'd moved the twins to a safe neighborhood where they could play outside without her constant worry. "Mama, it smells like heaven in here," Chijioke said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with his hair standing up at odd angles. At 5 years old, he was already showing signs of the natural leadership that would define him. Always the first to wake up, always checking on his quieter brother, Obinna. "Good morning, Mama. Did we wake you up?" Obinna is still sleeping, but I wanted to help. Chijioke climbed onto the step stool Esther had bought him and began carefully arranging napkins in the delivery boxes. Even at 5, he understood that this work was important, that it was how they'd built their new life. The transformation hadn't been easy. It had required 18-hour days, learning business skills through library books and community college night courses, and more exhaustion than Esther had known was possible. But every sacrifice had been worth it to see her sons thriving. Obinna appeared in the doorway, quieter and more observant than his brother. "Mama, are we rich now?" The question made Esther smile. "We are not rich, sweetheart, but we're secure. We have enough, and more importantly, we have each other. Mrs. Nwosu at daycare says you're an entrepreneur." "What's that?" Obinna asked. "It means someone who builds their own business." "Like a boss?" "Yes, exactly like a boss. Your mama is the boss of her own company now." Later that morning, after delivering the Okoro order, Esther drove to her appointment with Rosa Obi, who wanted to hire her for what could be her biggest contract yet, a wedding for 200 guests with a budget of 5 million naira. The Obi family lived in Ikoyi, the wealthy neighborhood where Esther had once lived with Martin Igbokwe. As she parked her used Honda in the circular driveway, she felt a familiar flutter of nerves. These consultations with affluent clients still reminded her of the world she'd briefly inhabited, a world of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and people who measured worth by appearances. But Esther was different now. She wore her best business suit, not expensive, but clean and professional, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd built something real with her own hands. Mrs. Obi greeted her at the door, an elegant woman in her 50s, who managed to be both wealthy and genuinely warm. "Miss Chime, please come in. I've heard wonderful things about your work." They sat in a living room bigger than Esther's entire house, discussing menu options and logistics. Esther had learned to navigate these conversations with professional confidence, never intimidated, but always respectful. "Your references are exceptional," Mrs. Obi said, reviewing the portfolio Esther had prepared, the Henderson anniversary party, the Torres Quinceañera. "The photos of your food are absolutely beautiful." "Thank you. I take pride in both taste and presentation. Every event reflects the family's personality and traditions." Mrs. Obi smiled. "I have to ask, how did you get started? You seem so young to have built such a reputation." Esther had prepared for this question. "I started cooking out of necessity when my sons were babies. I'm a single mother, and I needed to find a way to support them while staying home. What began as survival became passion." "Single mother. How old are your children?" "Twin boys. 5 years old. They're the reason I work so hard. I want them to have opportunities one didn't have." Mrs. Obi's expression softened. "That's admirable. Building a business while raising twins alone takes incredible strength. Strength. Esther had heard that word so often now, but it still felt strange. She didn't feel strong most days. She felt tired, worried, constantly pushing herself to do more, be more, achieve more. But maybe that was what strength actually looked like. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear stop you. Can you handle an event this size? Mrs. Obi asked. 200 guests is ambitious. Absolutely. I work with a network of trusted assistants for larger events, and I can provide references from similar occasions. Esther's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. This contract would change everything. The deposit alone would let her put a down payment on a house. Wonderful. I'd like to book you for June 15th. As Esther drove home with the signed contract, her mind raced with possibilities. This success would lead to more referrals, bigger events, maybe even the opportunity to open an actual restaurant someday. But more than business growth, she felt something deeper, vindication. Martin had called her nothing. He'd said she came from nothing and would always be nothing. But tonight, she would go home to her sons in their safe house with a contract that would earn her more in one weekend than Martin had ever given her in monthly allowances. It's been 10 years since Martin Igbokwe abandoned her. Esther stood in her corner office overlooking Lagos' bustling business district, reviewing the morning schedule on her tablet. Elegantia Events, the company that had grown from her kitchen table catering business, now occupied the entire 15th floor of the prestigious Wellington Tower. The brass nameplate on her mahogany desk read, Esther Chime, President and CEO. The view through the floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city where she had once struggled to survive. At 36, Esther had transformed not just her circumstances, but herself. The uncertain young woman who had once tried desperately to fit into Martin's world was gone. In her place stood a confident businesswoman who belonged in any room she entered, not because someone else granted her access, but because she'd earned her place through talent, innovation, and relentless work. Miss Chime, the Okonkwo family is here for their consultation, her assistant Jennifer said as she appeared in the doorway. Send them in, please, Esther replied. And remind me, I need to leave by 4:30 today for Chijioke Nobina's academic award ceremony. The Okonkwo consultation went smoothly. They wanted Elegantia Events to coordinate their son's wedding, a lavish affair with 300 guests and a budget of 150 million naira, every detail customized to perfection. 5 years ago, such a contract would have seemed impossible. Now, it was Tuesday's second appointment. Your portfolio is remarkable, Mrs. Okonkwo said, flipping through the leather-bound album showcasing Esther's work. The governor's charity gala last month was stunning, and I heard you coordinated the Sinclair merger celebration. Everyone's still talking about those ice sculptures that spelled out the company names. Esther smiled graciously. Each event is unique to our client's vision. We specialize in creating experiences that reflect your family's values and celebrate your most important moments. The truth was, Elegantia Events had become the premier luxury event planning company in Lagos. Esther's combination of artistic vision, flawless execution, and genuine care for her clients had built a reputation that kept her booked solid for the next 20 months. She employed 18 full-time staff members and worked with a network of trusted vendors who competed for the privilege of being associated with her events. But more than business success, what filled Esther with the deepest satisfaction was watching her sons flourish in ways that exceeded even her highest hopes. At 4:15 p.m., Esther left the office early to attend Chijioke Nobina's award ceremony at St. Mary's Academy. The private school had been the best investment she had ever made, not just for their education, but for the confidence it had given her sons. She arrived at the prestigious campus and was struck by how natural it felt to walk through the marble hallways lined with portraits of distinguished alumni. The first time she had brought the boys for their entrance interview, She had felt like an imposter. Now, as one of the school's major donors and a member of the Parent Advisory Board, she belonged there as much as anyone. Maria Sarah Henderson, mother of one of Obinna's classmates, waved her over. "I was hoping to catch you. Did you get my message about the spring fundraising committee?" "Yes, I'll be happy to coordinate the silent auction," Esther replied. "Elegantia Events will handle it pro bono." "Of course," Sarah beamed. "You're incredible. I don't know how you manage everything. Your company, the boys, all your community involvement." The ceremony began, and Esther found her seat in the third row, reserved for families of honor students. She watched with immense pride as both her sons were called to the stage, for very different achievements reflecting their distinct personalities. Chijioke was named Student Council President for the upcoming year, the youngest student ever elected to the position. At 10 years old, he possessed a natural charisma that drew people to him, combined with an ethical compass that Esther had worked hard to instill. He was the kind of leader who inspired others not through dominance, but through genuine care for their welfare. Obinna received the Creative Arts Excellence Award for a short story he had written about a single mother who built a business empire while raising twins. His teacher had submitted it to a national youth writing contest, where it placed second among thousands of entries. Obinna had inherited Esther's emotional intelligence, combined with an artistic soul that saw beauty and meaning in everything around him. When they returned to their seats, Chijioke leaned over and whispered, "Thanks for being here, Mama. I know you had important meetings today. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Esther whispered back, meaning every word. Obinna, more observant than his brother, studied her face carefully. "Are you proud of us?" The question caught Esther off guard. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you both. Sometimes I can't even breathe from the joy of it. You've become such remarkable young men." "Good," Obinna said seriously, "because we're really proud of you too." Tommy Henderson's mom said, "You're the most successful woman she knows." Later that evening, after celebrating at the boys' favorite restaurant, Esther tucked them into bed in their beautiful home in Ikoyi. The house was a testament to how far they had come. 5 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen where Esther still loved to experiment with new recipes, and a backyard where the boys could play soccer with their friends. "Mom," Obinna said as she kissed his forehead, "can I ask you something that might be hard to answer?" Esther sat on the edge of his bed, recognizing his serious tone. "Of course, sweetheart. Do you ever think about our father? Not like missing him or anything," he added quickly, "but wondering what his life is like now." The question was more complex than Obinna probably realized. "Sometimes," Esther admitted, "but not the way I used to." "How did you used to think about him?" Chijioke asked, appearing in the doorway in his pajamas. Esther considered how to answer honestly without burdening them with her pain. "For a long time, I thought about him with hurt and anger. He made me feel worthless, and I carried that feeling around like a heavy stone. But not anymore." "No, not anymore," Obinna asked. "Now, when I think about him, I mostly feel curious. I wonder if he's happy, if he ever thinks about the choices he made, if he knows what he missed by not being part of your lives." Chijioke climbed onto the bed beside his brother. "Do you think he knows about us? About what we've accomplished?" Esther pulled both boys close, overwhelmed by their maturity and insight. "I think there are probably moments when he wonders what happened to us. But honestly, it doesn't matter anymore whether he knows or not. We built something beautiful without him. Sometimes I wonder if we would have been different if he'd stayed," Obinna said quietly. "Different how?" "Maybe not as close to you. Maybe not as strong, I guess. Like we had to learn to take care of each other because it was just us 3. Esther felt tears prick her eyes. "You know what? I think you're absolutely right. The three of us became a team because we had to, and that made us stronger than most families ever get to be. Plus, Chijioke added with 10-year-old pragmatism, if he was the kind of person who could leave his pregnant wife, we probably wouldn't have liked him very much anyway. As Esther turned out the lights and headed to her own room, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 10 years ago, she had been broken, desperate, and convinced she was nothing. Tonight, she was the CEO of a successful company, the mother of 2 extraordinary children, and a respected member of her community. She had proven Martin Igbokwe wrong in every possible way. But more importantly, she had proven something to herself. That worth isn't determined by someone else's opinion, no matter how cruelly they express it. Standing at her bedroom window, looking out at the city lights, Esther allowed herself to imagine what Martin's life looked like now. Was he happy? Had he achieved everything he thought he wanted when he threw away his family for someone better? The questions no longer came from a place of pain or even curiosity about reconciliation. They came from a place of genuine wonder about the path not taken. Martin had made his choice based on what he thought would bring him happiness and success. Esther had made hers based on love and responsibility. Looking at the life she had built, the sons she had raised, and the respect she had earned in her community, Esther knew without a doubt which choice had led to real fulfillment. She had learned that the best response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's building a life so meaningful and joyful that the person who tried to diminish you becomes irrelevant to your happiness. Martin Igbokwe had called her nothing, but his opinion had long since lost any power to hurt her. Esther Chime was everything she'd chosen to become, and that transformation had been accomplished entirely through her own courage, love, and refusal to accept someone else's definition of her worth. Martin stood on the balcony of his penthouse, surveying the city below with the satisfaction of a man who believed he owned everything in sight. At 38, he had methodically achieved every goal he'd set for himself. A real estate empire worth billions of naira, political connections that opened doors across the state, and now the perfect woman to complete his carefully constructed image. But lately, in quiet moments like this, Martin found his mind wandering to places he thought he had permanently closed off. The silence of his perfect life felt hollow, and he couldn't shake the nagging sense that something essential was missing. "Darling, the wedding planner is here," Stephanie called from inside, her voice carrying that breathless charm that had initially drawn him in. "She wants to go over the final guest list." Martin straightened his tie and walked back inside. Stephanie was arranging herself elegantly on their white leather sofa. At 28, she embodied everything he had convinced himself he wanted. Blonde, beautiful, from exactly the right kind of family. Her father owned a chain of luxury hotels across the southeast. Her mother sat on the boards of prestigious charities. Stephanie herself moved through high society with effortless grace. She was, Martin told himself repeatedly, his perfect match. Unlike his first marriage, this relationship made sense on paper. Two successful people from similar backgrounds, building a life that would impress everyone who mattered. "Mr. Igbokwe, we have confirmations from 243 guests so far," Ms. Chen, the wedding planner, said efficiently. "The governor will attend, and Senator Morrison's wife will represent their family." Martin nodded with satisfaction. This wedding would be the social event of the season. 500 guests at the Grand Belmont Hotel, dinner catered by the city's most exclusive restaurant, entertainment by a jazz quartet normally reserved for heads of state. It would be public validation of his choices, proof that he had chosen correctly when he ended his first marriage for something better. "What about press coverage?" he asked. 3 newspapers for the society pages, plus a lifestyle magazine wants a 6-page spread, Ms. Chen replied. Perfect. That was exactly what he wanted. But even as he planned this public celebration, the restlessness he had felt for months persisted. Success felt emptier than he expected. "Oh, Martin," Stephanie said suddenly, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Didn't you mention wanting to invite your first wife? Esther Chime. Martin's jaw tightened. Yes. Have we sent her invitation yet? The truth was, Martin had been thinking about Esther more than he cared to admit. Not with longing, not with regret. He told himself he felt neither, but with a curiosity about what had become of her after he left. 10 years of silence. No calls, no requests for money, nothing. That absence of drama had been exactly what he wanted, but now it felt almost unsettling. I have her address here, Ms. Chen said, consulting her list. 412, Maple Street, apartment 3B. Shall I add her to the formal invitation list? Absolutely, Martin said coldly, a calculating smile spreading across his face. Make sure she gets the full package, the embossed stationery, the silk envelope, everything. I want her to understand exactly what kind of event this is. The decision wasn't entirely rational. Part curiosity, part cruelty, and perhaps part need to prove to himself that his choices had been correct. Stephanie looked puzzled. Why invite an ex-wife to your wedding? Isn't that asking for drama? Martin walked to the window again, hands clasped behind his back. Let's call it closure, darling. Esther needs to see what real success looks like. She needs to understand the difference between her world and mine. Even as he said it, he wasn't entirely sure what he expected. In his mind, Esther was still the broken, desperate woman he had left behind 10 years ago. He imagined her struggling, marked by poverty and failure. Inviting her would be a final demonstration of how right he had been to leave, how much better his life had become without her dragging him down. Where is Maple Street? Stephanie asked delicately. The East Side, Martin said dismissively. Definitely not your social circle, sweetheart. Ms. Chen cleared her throat. Actually, Mr. Igbokwe, I had to research the correct address. There are several Esther Chimes in the city, and there's also mention of children. Martin's expression hardened. That's not my concern. 3 days later, Esther was reviewing vendor contracts in her office when Chidima knocked on the door, holding a cream-colored envelope. This came by special delivery, she said, placing the envelope on Esther's desk. Hand-delivered by a courier in a tuxedo, if you can believe that. Esther glanced at the envelope and immediately recognized the expensive paper stock and formal calligraphy. But it was the return address that made her blood run cold. Mr. and Mrs. Martin Igbokwe. That wasn't right. Martin wasn't married, or at least, not to her. With trembling fingers, Esther opened the envelope and pulled out the thick embossed invitation card. Mr. Martin Igbokwe and Miss Stephanie Williams. Request the honor of your presence at their wedding ceremony. Saturday the 15th of June, 6 p.m. Grand Belmont Hotel. Reception to follow. Black tie required. Esther stared at the invitation. Martin was getting married. After 10 years of silence, he had chosen to invite her to witness his new beginning. She turned the card over and found a handwritten note in Martin's familiar script. Esther, I thought you might enjoy seeing how well some people recover from their mistakes. I hope you'll be able to attend. It should be quite an educational experience for you. FS. The casual cruelty hit her like a physical blow. Even after all these years, even with all her success, Martin still saw her as someone beneath him, someone to humiliate and dismiss. Esther set the invitation down carefully and walked to the window, looking out at the city she now knew so well. Martin had no idea who she'd become. In his mind, she was still the broken woman he had left behind. This invitation wasn't about celebrating his happiness. It was about forcing her to witness what he perceived as her continued misery compared to his triumph. Are you all right? Chidima's voice broke through her thoughts. You look upset. Esther forced a smile.
infine.
Just an invitation from someone I used to know. Must be quite someone to send such an elaborate invitation. Chidima's eyes widened. You're not going, right? You're going to ignore this nonsense and throw the invitation where it belongs. Esther was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. Actually, I think I am going. Chidima reached across and grabbed her sister's hand. Why would you put yourself through that? You've built such a beautiful life. Why give him the satisfaction? Because, Esther said slowly, her voice steady. He's expecting to see the old Esther, the broken, poor woman he left behind. He has no idea who I've become. Chidima's expression shifted from concern to understanding. You want to show him what he lost, she said. Yes, Esther replied. I want him to see Chijioke and Obinna, his sons. I want him to see the successful businesswoman I became, the life I built from the ashes he left behind. Chidima smiled. You're right. That man has no idea what's coming for him. Esther folded the invitation carefully and put it back in her purse. I need to start planning. The boys will need formal wear, and I'll need something spectacular to wear. This is going to be expensive, Chidima warned. There's no amount of money I wouldn't spend to show Martin Igbokwe exactly who he's dealing with now, Esther said firmly. As they left the cafe, Esther felt that familiar fire in her chest, the same sense of purpose that had carried her through night school, through building her business, through every challenge of the past 10 years. Martin thought he was orchestrating her humiliation. Instead, he had just given her the stage for her greatest triumph. The broken woman he'd discarded was long gone. In her place stood Esther Chime, and she was ready to show the world exactly what Martin Igbokwe foolishly threw. The next morning, Esther woke with a sense of purpose that felt almost electric. As she prepared breakfast for Chijioke and Obinna, her mind was already running through the logistics of what she had privately begun calling Operation Vindication. Martin's wedding was in exactly 3 weeks, enough time to orchestrate the perfect entrance, but not so much that she could second-guess herself. Mom, you seem different today, Chijioke observed, looking up from his cereal with the sharp perception that had always made him exceptional. Excited and different. Did something big happen with Elegantia events? Obinna asked. Esther smiled at her intuitive sons. Something like that. How would you like to attend a very elegant, very important wedding with me? Tuxedos. Chijioke straightened in his chair, suddenly looking more like a young gentleman than a 10-year-old. Yes, Esther said. A very formal affair. Black tie. 500 guests at the Grand Belmont Hotel. You'll need to behave perfectly around some very wealthy, very powerful people. Like the charity galas we attend with you. Obinna asked. Exactly. But even more formal, Esther replied. I need to know you can handle yourselves with complete dignity around people who might be judgmental. Chijioke's expression sharpened with understanding beyond his years. So this is like proving a point. Something like that, Esther said. I want Martin to see who we are as a family. I want him to understand that his opinion of us was wrong. Are you nervous? Obinna asked, always attuned to emotions. Esther considered the question. No, sir. I'm ready. Then we'll be ready, too. Chijioke declared confidently. We'll be the best dressed, most polite kids there. Thanks to all those charity galas and business dinners, you've been preparing for this your whole lives, Esther said, proud. You already know how to interact with adults with respect and confidence. That afternoon, Esther closed her office early and picked up Chidima for what she jokingly called a reconnaissance mission. They drove to the Grand Belmont Hotel, where Esther had arranged to meet with the event coordinator under the pretense of considering the venue for a high-profile client event. Mrs. Saavedra Rebecca, the event coordinator, greeted them warmly. Thank you for considering the Belmont. Let me show you our premier ballroom. It's being set up for a major wedding this weekend. Perfect, Esther thought. The ballroom was breathtaking. Massive crystal chandeliers, silk draping in ivory and gold, round tables set with the finest Waterford crystal and sterling silver. White orchids and roses in elaborate arrangements created stunning centerpieces, and a string quartet rehearsed near the raised platform where the head table would be positioned. "This is the Igbo wedding," Rebecca explained proudly. 500 guests, unlimited budget, full black tie affair, ice sculptures, premium champagne worth over 10 million Nigerian nairas, and even the governor's security detail coordinating with our team. Esther catalogued every detail. The head table's elevated position would give Martin and Stephanie a perfect view of the entire room, ensuring that every guest would see whoever made an entrance. The curved staircase leading into the ballroom guaranteed maximum attention for anyone descending those steps. "The cocktail reception will be in the Rose Garden," Rebecca continued, leading them outside to a terrace overlooking the city skyline. "Weather permitting, of course. The forecast looks perfect." As they toured, Esther's strategy began to crystallize. She would arrive during the cocktail hour, mingling among the crowd before making her dramatic entrance down the staircase with Chijioke and Obinna. "Maximum impact. This is absolutely stunning," Chidima murmured. "Are you sure you're ready for this spectacle?" "I've never been more ready," Esther replied with quiet conviction. The following Saturday, Esther and Chidima began Operation Transformation Phase 2. Their first stop was Nordstrom, where Esther met with Patricia, her personal shopper. "I need something absolutely spectacular," Esther told Patricia. "A black tie wedding, and I want to make an unforgettable impression." Patricia's eyes lit up. "What's your budget?" "Whatever it takes," Esther said without hesitation. 3 hours later, they found the ideal dress, a stunning midnight blue gown by Oscar de Renta. It hugged Esther's figure perfectly before flowing into an elegant train. The color was sophisticated and dramatic, complementing her olive skin tone beautifully. "This isn't just a dress. It's armor," Esther said. Confidence made visible. The twins were easier, but no less important to outfit properly. At the formal wear shop, Chijioke and Obinna approached selecting tuxedos with seriousness. "Do we look like we belong at a fancy wedding?" Obinna asked, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "You look like young gentlemen," Esther said proudly. "But remember, how you behave will be just as important as how you look." "We know how to handle ourselves at formal events," Chijioke said confidently. "We've been doing it for years." In the week leading up to the wedding, Esther threw herself into preparation with the same intensity she brought to her most important business deals. Hairstylist, makeup artist, luxury car service, photographer, it was all arranged. She wanted this documented. But more than external preparations, Esther spent time preparing mentally and emotionally. She practiced potential conversations with Martin, imagined scenarios, and steeled herself for whatever reaction her appearance might provoke. "Are you nervous?" Chidima asked the night before the wedding. "Surprisingly, no," Esther said honestly. "I feel peaceful, like I'm finally closing a chapter that's been open too long." Chidima studied her. "You've really changed, not just since Martin left, but in the past few weeks since you got that invitation. You seem powerful." Esther considered. "I finally understand something that took me 10 years to learn. Martin's opinion of me never mattered. It was never about whether I was good enough for him. It was about whether he was good enough for me. And the answer is very clear now." Chidima smiled. "Those boys are lucky to have you as their mother." "I'm the lucky one," Esther said, glancing toward the stairs where Chijioke and Obinna slept. "They saved me. Having something so precious to fight for made me stronger than I ever knew I could be." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm. Esther woke early, methodically preparing for the most important battle of her life. Hair, makeup, dress, jewelry. Each piece represented a milestone achieved through her own determination. "Boys," she called upstairs. "Time to get ready." Chijioke and Obinna appeared in their tuxedos, bow ties perfectly straight, hair neatly combed. They looked so handsome that Esther felt tears threaten her carefully applied makeup. "You look perfect," she said, completely sincere. "You both look like the incredible young men you're becoming." Diego straightened his shoulders, assuming the posture of confidence. "Are you ready to show everyone who we are?" Esther looked at herself and her sons in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back bore no resemblance to the broken person Martin had discarded 10 years ago. She was confident, successful, and surrounded by love. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm ready." As their car service arrived, Esther felt a strange sense of completion. 10 years of building, struggling, and growing had prepared her for this moment. Martin thought he was inviting the old Esther to witness his triumph. Instead, he was about to meet the woman she had become, and discover exactly what he had been foolish enough to throw away. "Let's go show someone what a terrible mistake looks like," she whispered as they settled into the car. Tonight, Martin Igbokwe would learn that some people don't stay broken. Some people rebuild themselves into something stronger, more beautiful, and infinitely more valuable than what they were before. The Blacktown car pulled up to the Grand Belmont Hotel at precisely 7:15 p.m., fashionably late, as Esther Chime had planned. Through the tinted windows, she could see elegantly dressed guests mingling on the rose garden terrace, champagne glasses catching the golden light of the setting sun. Laughter and conversation created the perfect backdrop for high society at play. "Are you ready, boys?" Esther asked, checking Chijioke and Obinna one final time. Both twins sat straight in their seats, looking remarkably composed for 10-year-olds about to attend what was clearly the social event of the season. "We're ready, Mom," Chijioke said with quiet confidence that reminded Esther of herself before important business presentations. "Remember what we practiced: firm handshakes, eye contact, and pleased to meet you when introduced to adults," Obinna added, solemnly adjusting his bow tie. "And stay close to me unless I tell you otherwise," Esther instructed. "Tonight, we represent our family." Her heart swelled with pride. These weren't just well-behaved children, they were young gentlemen who would hold their own in any company, regardless of wealth or social status. Martin Igbokwe had no idea what he'd missed by abandoning them. The driver opened the door, and Esther stepped out first. The midnight blue Oscar de Renta gown flowed around her like liquid silk, and she could feel the subtle shift in energy as nearby guests noticed her arrival. She was no longer the uncertain young woman who'd once felt intimidated by fancy venues and wealthy people. Tonight, she belonged here more than most of the guests inside. Chijioke and Obinna flanked her, their matching tuxedos perfectly tailored, their bearing confident but respectful. Together, the three of them looked like what they were, a family of substance and success who had earned their place in any room. Mrs. Sevedra, the maître d', greeted her warmly. "What a pleasure to see you again. Your work on the Sinclair merger celebration was magnificent." "Thank you, Robert. We're here for the Igbokwe wedding," Esther replied. "The cocktail reception is in the Rose Garden, and dinner begins at 8 p.m. The compliment on their appearance, "You and your young gentleman look absolutely stunning this evening," made Esther smile inwardly. As they walked through the opulent lobby toward the terrace, Esther caught glimpses of herself and the boys in the mirrored walls. They looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine, elegant, confident, and clearly accustomed to sophistication. The moment they stepped onto the terrace, conversations didn't stop abruptly, but heads turned. A ripple of attention spread, the kind that successful, beautiful people naturally command. "My goodness," a woman whispered. "Who is that stunning woman with those handsome boys?" "They look like they should be in a magazine," murmured another voice. Esther accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter, surveying the crowd with practiced ease. She recognized several faces from her professional and social circles: politicians, business leaders, and cultural figures she'd encountered through elegantia events and community involvement. These were Martin's people now. What he didn't realize was that many of them were also Esther's people, earned through her own merit rather than marriage. Senator Morrison's wife approached, smiling warmly. "I had no idea you'd be here. You look radiant, Esther." "Mrs. Morrison, how lovely to see you," Esther replied. "Allow me to introduce my sons, Chijioke and Obinna." The boys stepped forward with perfect manners, offering polite handshakes and warm smiles. "What delightful young men," Mrs. Morrison said, clearly impressed. "Are you enjoying your summer break?" "Yes, Chijioke replied confidently. "We've been helping our mother with some charity events." The introductions continued, Dr. Patricia Valdez, the mayor's chief of staff, Judge Harrison, prominent businessman, all impressed by Esther's professionalism and the boys' poise. To them, Esther wasn't some unknown party crasher. She was a respected entrepreneur and mother. From across the terrace, Esther saw Martin Igbokwe for the first time in 10 years. He was surrounded by wealthy men, laughing at his own jokes. At 38, he was still handsome, his dark hair streaked with silver, his physique maintained by trainers and nutritionists. He wore success like a perfectly tailored suit, but Esther felt nothing. Several of his guests began to notice her, curiosity spreading like wildfire. And then Stephanie Williams, the bride-to-be, approached Martin with the dramatic flair of someone used to being the center of attention. She gestured discreetly toward Esther. Martin's expression shifted from casual attention to shock as their eyes met. This was not the broken, desperate woman he'd expected. This was a woman who belonged in this world of wealth and influence, who commanded respect and attention in her own right. But when his gaze fell on Chijioke and Obinna, standing confidently beside their mother, the recognition truly hit. The twins were unmistakably his sons, inherited traits impossible to ignore. His face paled as the implications became clear. Esther decided it was time. With the twins by her side, she walked slowly across the terrace toward Martin's group. Conversations parted before them like water. "Boys," she whispered, "I want you to meet someone important in our story." They knew this moment was significant. When she reached Martin, she said warmly but firmly, "Hello, Martin. Thank you for the kind invitation to your wedding. It's been enlightening to see how well some people have done for themselves." The resemblance between him and the boys was undeniable. Chijioke had Martin's jawline and posture. Obinna bore his eyebrows softened by Esther's features. "These are my sons," Esther continued, her voice clear and confident. "Chijioke, Obinna, this is Mr. Igbokwe, the groom we came to congratulate." The boys stepped forward with impeccable manners, offering handshakes. Martin's hand trembled. How old are they?" he asked, voice full of shock. 10, Esther replied calmly. "Twins. They'll be 11 in February." Stephanie's eyes widened, realization dawning. She began to understand the enormity of the situation. "You abandoned your pregnant wife?" she whispered in disbelief. "It's complicated," Martin stammered. "Complicated?" Stephanie laughed bitterly. "What's complicated about being a decent human being? About taking care of your own children?" Whispers spread through the crowd. Prominent guests approached, horrified by the revelation. Esther remained calm, composed, letting the facts speak for themselves. "He chose not to be part of our children's lives. I raised them on my own." The crowd reacted with murmurs of admiration for Esther and the boys. Chijioke spoke up. "Mr. Igbokwe, my mother told us you didn't want children." The crowd murmured in approval. Several guests had tears in their eyes at the twins' composure and dignity. Stephanie approached Esther, crying. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I almost married a man capable of such cruelty." "You're not responsible for his choices," Esther replied gently. Stephanie announced to the crowd, "There will be no wedding tonight. I cannot marry someone who abandoned his children." The applause was immediate. Hundreds of influential people in the city supported Stephanie's decision. Martin stood alone by the fountain, his engagement ring forgotten. His life, carefully built over 15 years, was collapsing in front of him. 2 years after Martin Igbokwe's disastrous wedding, Esther Chime stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new executive suite, watching the morning sun illuminate the city skyline from the 30th floor of the Meridian Tower. The bronze nameplate on the reception desk now read Elegantia Events International. Esther Chime, founder and CEO. What had begun as survival cooking in a studio apartment had evolved into a luxury event planning empire with offices in 4 cities and clients across 3 countries. At 38, Esther embodied success in ways she had never imagined possible during those desperate early years. But more than the material achievements, What filled her with the deepest satisfaction was watching Chijioke and Obinna flourish into remarkable young men who exceeded her highest expectations every day. Her executive assistant, Chidima, appeared in the doorway with the morning schedule displayed on a tablet. "The Forbes photographer is here for your cover shoot, and the reporter from Harvard Business Review wants to confirm your interview time for this afternoon. Send the photographer to the conference room, please," Esther replied, "and remind me I need to leave by 3:30 for Chijioke and Obinna's debate tournament finals." The Forbes cover story was titled "The Phoenix Rises: How Single Mothers Are Building Nigeria's Next Business Empires." Esther was featured alongside tech innovators and industry leaders as one of the country's most successful self-made businesswomen. But what made her story unique wasn't just the financial success. It was the complete transformation from victim to victor, from abandoned wife to industry leader. The Harvard Business Review interview focused on crisis management and reputation building. Esther's handling of Martin's wedding confrontation had become legendary in business schools as an example of how dignity and authenticity could triumph over attempted humiliation. "What's fascinating about your story," the Harvard professor had said during a preliminary call, "is how you turned a moment of intended cruelty into the catalyst for unprecedented success." And it was true. The society figures who had witnessed Martin's public disgrace had not only embraced Esther personally but had actively promoted her business within their exclusive networks. Within 6 months, Elegantia Events had coordinated 3 gubernatorial campaign events, 2 corporate merger celebrations, and the city's most prestigious charity gala. At 3:15, Esther left her office to attend the most important event of her day, watching Chijioke and Obinna compete in the state championship debate tournament. At 12 years old, both twins had grown into exceptional young men, but their paths reflected their distinct personalities. Chijioke had been elected student body president at St. Mary's Academy for the 2nd consecutive year, making him the youngest student in the school's history to hold the position twice. His charisma and ethical leadership had caught the attention of several prestigious high schools, some already extending scholarship offers for his freshman year. Obinna, meanwhile, had won the state middle school creative writing championship and had just been accepted into Georgetown University's summer program for gifted young writers, an honor usually reserved for high school juniors and seniors. His short story about family resilience had been published in a national literary magazine and was being adapted into a short film by a local film school. But more than their individual achievements, what made Esther proudest was their character. The boys had grown up understanding that success without integrity was meaningless, that kindness was more important than winning, and that family loyalty was the foundation of all other relationships. The debate tournament was held at the city's most prestigious private school. Esther found her seat in the front row, where a placard reserved her spot as the parent of finalists Chijioke and Obinna. The topic was economic innovation and social responsibility. Chijioke argued passionately about ethical business practices, while Obinna analyzed how successful companies could address social inequality. Watching them debate, articulate and confident, Esther felt overwhelmed by pride and gratitude. These young men were becoming exactly the kind of leaders the world needed. Intelligent without arrogance, successful without selfishness, strong without cruelty. When the results were announced, Chijioke's team won first place, and Obinna's team took second. But what moved Esther most was watching the brothers congratulate each other with genuine joy, celebrating each other's success without jealousy. "Mom," Chijioke said as they left the auditorium, his first place trophy in hand, "did you see? Obinna's closing argument was incredible. He's going to be an amazing writer someday. And did you hear Chijioke's point about corporate responsibility?" Obinna added, beaming. "He's going to change how businesses think about their communities." That evening, after celebrating at the twins' favorite restaurant, Esther tucked Chijioke and Obinna into bed in their beautiful Riverside Hills home. "Mom," Obinna said as she kissed his forehead, "can I ask you something I've been thinking about?" "Of course, sweetheart. Do you think we would be different people if our father had stayed? Like, would we care about different things or have different values?" Esther considered the question. "That's profound. I think you might be very different. You might have grown up taking certain privileges for granted, or you might not have learned to value hard work and resilience the way you do now." Chijioke, who had been listening from the doorway, nodded. "I think we're lucky he left," he said simply. "Not because we don't want a father, but because we got to see how strong and amazing you are. If he'd stayed, we might never have learned that families can be built on love and respect instead of just existing." Esther felt tears prick her eyes. Obinna added seriously, "And we learned that real love means supporting each other's dreams, not tearing each other down. And that success means being proud of who you are, not making others feel small." The broken woman she had once been was gone forever. In her place stood Esther Chime, successful entrepreneur, devoted mother, and living proof that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from building a life so meaningful that their opinions become irrelevant. As she turned out the lights, Esther smiled at the thought of tomorrow. Chijioke had a student government meeting to plan a community service project. Obinna had creative writing club and a mentoring session with a published author, and she had an international consultation for a charity gala benefiting children of single mothers. Life was full, purposeful, and completely her own. Martin Igbokwe had called her nothing and walked away from the most precious things life had to offer. But his cruelty had become the catalyst for her greatest triumphs, while his own choices had reduced him to exactly what he had once accused her of being. Justice, Esther understood now, wasn't about revenge. Justice was becoming so completely yourself that those who tried to diminish you fade into irrelevance while you rise into everything you were always meant to be. Esther Chime was magnificent. And as she looked out at the city lights one last time that night, she knew this was only the beginning of her story. If you've ever faced betrayal, heartbreak, or someone trying to define your worth, remember Esther's journey. Let it inspire you to rise, to build, and to never let anyone else dictate your story. Comment below, what would you do if life tried to knock you down? And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter in stories that inspire and empower. Thank you for sticking with us.